Hi, I'm Matt Nesto, the editor-in-chief at payments.com, and we are talking mobile banking here today. We've just put out a new study, the Mobile Banking App Playbook, and we're looking at the particular aspect of on-demand authentication and how it is helping mobile banking catch up to the desktop side of things and what in particular consumers and businesses want to see. So I have a pretty neat panel to welcome here to our conversation here today. First is Entersekt CEO, Schalk Nolte. Great to see you. And in the blue corner, there he is, Mr. Chris Ward, joining us on the road today. On the West Coast, far from his HQ, PNC's head of products and innovation and treasury management. Chris, great to have you on as well.
Thank you.
So let's just start with an overview, if we can. Let's just talk about the kind of the case for continuous authentication, and maybe even start back up a little bit and tell me about what it is and how you think it's going to hasten mobile banking's ascent.
So there's obviously the definition in terms of continuous authentication. I think depending on who you speak with in terms of the industry, on biometric side, they think the fact that, as an example, that you're using your device and we continuously checking if this is you using your device is the definition of that. And from where we're saying, I'm starting in terms of continuous, it's firstly identifying specifically the device that we know this is who you are, you're saying, and all comms obviously between the two devices are there. But specifically biometrics and other parties have a very incredible place, in terms of importance to play with this. So from our perspective, it is, somehow determining continuously that this is the party, that we are engaging with. And, where this comes from specifically is, and I think this is, it's a good time to understand or to talk about this, it is obviously the zero trust that is obviously quite prevalent in terms of the news. And what zero trust refers to and means is that, gone are the days where we can open a door and let somebody in, and once they're inside, do whatever it is they want to do, because we've let them in the door and we've checked their ID or digital ID portion of that. So continuous is just whatever action we take, we continuously check that you are who you say you are, even if after you've passed that door where we also checked who you are. So I think that is, in terms of mobile, it's possibly and probably being done a lot better just by the nature of it than what we've seen with regards to traditional online banking.
Let me bring in Chris here. So on the banking side of things, Chris, your job is to guard that treasury, right? You have all kinds of systems in place. So what do you think about this zero trust aspect, and also how does it continuous authentication actually play out in the real world, as we say, on the actual banking side?
Exactly. So listen, I think one of the way I like to describe the economy, and I was doing this before COVID, but COVID's really accelerated, is what I call the three eyes of the economy. The first eye is it's immediate. So everybody wants to do transactions immediately. They want to move money immediately. They want to order their coffee. They want to order their groceries on their phone and have an immediate feedback. The second thing is interconnected. The second eye is interconnected. So interconnected experiences. So it's the same thing with banking, right? So you're doing a transaction, whether you want to be authorized while a transaction is occurring in the background, or something along those lines, that zero trust and that independent authentication. And the third eye of an interrupted economy is really driving towards, if you're not doing immediate, if you're not doing interconnected, you're going to be interrupted. And mobile banking is the same way. If you're not providing the right level of authentication and interaction with the customer to build that trust, well, we say zero trust, right? Like the term we're using today is zero trust, but you are actually building trust with the consumer or the business, because they know that you're engaging with them in a way to ensure that you're providing safe, sound, and secure access to their account, or safe, sound, and secure authentication or authorization of a transaction. And that is a massive trend. If you look at products we've recently launched for our consumers, it's really geared towards giving them the control when they want it, how they want it, being able to also validate their transactions. So it's ubiquitous through the whole process.
So, I'm a mobile banking guy. Tell me, but I don't, shine some light here for me, Scott. How does this work? This where I have control and this whole zero trust thing. I mean, I know the study we just did said like 64% of consumers consider it very or extremely important to be able to authenticate specific transactions. And then another quarter said it was somewhat important. So like 90% of consumers believe it's important to be able to authenticate specific transactions, IRT, in real time. Help me out here, because I'm a banker. I do this. I'm a banking customer, not a banker.
So Matt, this is different, obviously, in terms of times, various parts of the world. In terms of specifically, I think it is, if you look at the likes of PSD2, SCA, obviously it's a version of open banking from Europe, and we're seeing that actually being transported across the globe. So the premise of that is that literally we need to be able to reach out to a customer. I think this is specifically also where Entersekt came from. We thought about this 10 years ago. Wouldn't it be magic that if we could just before a transaction occurs, reach out to you and say, is this really what you want to do? And that's the power of it. The real-time authentication. There were many schools of thought, and specifically in the US, it was that we don't want to do that. We don't want to inconvenience our customer. We want to do whatever we can in the background and just not touch our customer. And I think that has changed specifically because the important thing to realize is that a customer actually feels empowered because it is your money. All right, you feel in control. You can actually see if something happens. If your wife, as an example, has one of your cards, you can see that, hang on, there's notification, but also there's an approval in certain instances where you can say potentially no to that $500 per pair of shoes. You might have a lot of trouble later on, but the control is at least there. So I think this is something that we've seen counterintuitively, nearly, that if you get this right, where you actually have that approval process that feels it kind of feels like you're actually going to make your customers' lives more difficult, but they like it because it's predictive. You understand how this works. If you make it omni-channel, it's something that we know that this works on e-commerce. We know this is the same experience on mobile banking, on internet banking and wider. We actually see transactions starting to increase, and then we see a lot of movement towards this. So it's empowering. And once customers, and as Chris specifically said, and I think that's a great way in terms of zero trust, the antithesis towards that, or the other side of the coin that's actually combating that, is proper and continuous authentication. Your customers are empowered and they do trust you. And I mean, at the corner and at the core of what a bank does is actually building trust with their customer relations.
I keep having flashbacks to the Ronald Reagan quote, "Trust but verify." Is this a Trojan horse? I mean, I'm trying to get my head around how zero trust is the new trust. I mean, it seems like there's almost oxymoronic to me.
Yeah, listen, it does sound that way, but it's really, you almost can think of it as dynamic trust as well, because you're obviously risk weighting, different types of transactions and deciding, which transactions need stepped up authentication versus not. But it really, at the end of the day, it's all about creating with your customer that they are in control of their money movement. They're in control of what's going on with their account. And that is really important. If you look at, the shifts in payment trends and shifting to consumers pushing money out of their account instead of people coming and getting money and taking money out of their account, that's a huge dynamic shift in the way consumers think about it. And zero trust is really critical to that whole shift in dynamics and shift of how people think of, and small businesses and large companies think about sending money out of their accounts. It's the critical nugget to that whole equation.
So that and $500 shoes, I guess it's all tied in. Chris, if you could talk to the, like the implementation concerns, any regulatory concerns for putting this kind of technology into place, that would be great.
Yeah, so it is a bit of threading the needle, right? So you've got privacy laws and other things, right, that you have to balance with how you're authenticating and allowing a customer to give you the right to get the right authorizations. But at the end of the day, it's, being able to bind an individual to their phone or to their mobile device of whatever it is really critical to this equation. And it's a lot less about the actual form factor. It's more about actually driving adoption, ensuring you've got the right privacy processes in place, and then lastly, making sure that all of those components of your infrastructure are talking to one another. There's nothing more frustrating than, whether it be out-of-band security or whatever, that if it doesn't seem like it's connected, it creates a bad customer experience. Like, when I'm having to click the crosswalks or whatever on something, when I'm getting it and I get it wrong, I get very frustrated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so if a customer has a bad experience, then they might opt out of, that type of authentication going forward when it's actually the best thing for them. So keeping that form factor, UI experience, and everything integrated is actually the hard part versus the legal framework.
Gotcha. So we, Schalk, to go back to the study, I thought this one struck me, one of these little factoids that we pull out. It said all consumers who don't trust their banks, all of them, say that they would want to add authentication to, do merchant or contractor payments. But at the same time, like 90% of consumers who actually trust their banks a lot want the same thing. So are we saying everybody wants this in a kind of a roundabout way?
We are, and I think that's what we've seen globally. Apologies. So in terms of authentication, as I said, it's really empowering. It's customers feel that they're in control, and that it ensures that you can, even if you don't trust your bank. But it's not really about that. It's possibly, I think it's about trusting the systems around it. And that's where it gets, it is an omni-channel authentication solution, which means we must look at, to the regulatory question earlier, but also wider. We must look at what tools we have. It's taking, device fingerprint as an example in certain instances can be that this is personal information. There are ways to get around that. Use a certificate as an example, which ensures that, we can make the device unique, but not get in place of, certain privacy concerns. But also, obviously where we have geolocation, for certain, we've seen that on a banking application where customers have to give the, permission for that. A lot of customers are very nervous to give certain permissions, which are used to make their lives, safer, frankly. So I think it is very much, it's a give and take in terms of security, in terms of trust. If you don't allow the bank the tools, a lot of us feel like, well, what do you want to do with this? Why do you want to know where I am? But it is, if we know where you are, we can check in with the likes of, we as Entersekt, we partnered with new data where we can see, hang on, this is data we see on the one side, and we can protect you. There's fraud is getting super fancy as an example, where we can see that it's kind of like the bank calling you, or they claim to be, and these guys know a hell of a lot of information, what we've seen in certain territories. They know all the typical questions that are asked, to determine if it's you. They know your last couple of transactions, in certain instances. Some of these fraudsters literally, they pass over, let me call my supervisor, and they have, pause turns in between. It's incredible, the sophistication. So what these tools allow us to do then, so what they're trying to do, just as a pause, they're trying to get you to authenticate a transaction, because, this technology really works. That's why you see 100%, frankly, of people want this, because it does work. It allows you to really say yes or no. So the next attack angle then is, listen, I'm going to get you to say yes to something that you don't want to say yes to. Otherwise, how do I get hold of your money? And this is where it gets interesting, where you use the likes of a behavioral biometrics, new data, new detect service, where we can see that, hang on, this is not typical behavior for Matt. Matt typically does, banking from his mobile and, or puts it down, or does from his internet, or hang on, what we're seeing is this is coming in from a device that is known with bad behavior, and we can tie it up and see that, listen, this is your device that you're authenticating from, but something doesn't look quite right. So from our perspective, it is, it's a customers need to, when they say they don't trust their bank but still want to be in control of the authentication, it can be done, but I think it's a two-way street. We need to empower our banks to protect us.
Just an aside observation, again, I use myself as the average consumer, and I was reading the report and the notes on this discussion that said desktop internet banking is still ahead of mobile banking. Mobile banking is gaining fast, but it was still, I was surprised to read that. I would have figured that mobile had already been ahead, but what do I know? I'm not in the biz, but Chris, you're in the biz. What is it that's, what are you hearing from your customers here in terms of the wants, the asks, right now that particularly point to the mobile side, and then the challenges that come to actually putting that into play?
Yeah, I think, I think one of the impacts, back to the point that you made, was, with the pandemic, a lot of people are in their houses on their PCs, right? So, which has probably driven a little bit of skewing in the mobile numbers. But, when you get what customers are really want is they want the ability to know that they can get to us securely, that we're actually watching out for them, right? And that, if you just take the example of how frustrating it can be if you're someplace using, a physical thing to try to do it, and you're getting denied because they don't think you're in a location that you should be, but meanwhile, you're standing there with your mobile phone, right? Customers are expecting us to triangulate and to figure out what's going on to actually reduce declines and other things, right? They want access to their money. They want to transact when they want to transact, and they want us to make sure that we're stopping the bad guys, but we're also allowing them to transact, even though it's quasi out of pattern for them, because we've been able to figure out that it is really them transacting. So that's really, when you stitch that all together, that's what customers really want, and they want to be able to do that on their device. It's, payment controls, whatever, card controls, lock my account, unlock my account. They want all of those things so that they can have much more easier access and ensure that they are managing their money effectively in a safe, sound, and secure manner.
Schalk, this whole push now, everything, better, faster, more, right? From whether how quickly your Amazon or Walmart.com package can arrive to, a banking transaction is even faster. People won't even wait a day or two, right? They don't even want to wait a minute. Tell me about the
Exactly.
push for real-time data access. I mean, is it actually doable? I mean, it's, if your package is late a day or if it gets delivered to the wrong house, it's not your bank account, right? It's not money sent that's never coming back. So that's the kind of push and pull here, if I understand it correctly.
Exactly, Matt. And I think you said it, it's the money sent never coming back. So I think it's definitely not in the industry's interest, and obviously it's our obligation to ensure that it's as secure as is required here. So and it is possible. The technology is there. And what Chris has said is a very good example again in terms of that. Sometimes we need to pick up if it's out of pattern for a customer. So the problem is, and specifically with the pandemic, what we've seen is a lot of people that are first-time users. There is no pattern that we've seen. If anything and everything is out of pattern. So, and that gets back to closing the loop in terms of, authentication and, out of band authentication, where we always need that way to reach out to you and say, hang on, Chris, this might be out of pattern for you, but, is this you? And then we can check, yes, this is you. And if possible, if you've allowed your location, we can see that. And if we've enabled, new detect or whatever, behavioral biometrics, this is you and the way you use your device, and we can ensure without a doubt that you can transfer that and it's gone, and there's no risk in terms of requiring it to come back. And I think that is the essence. I mean, this is ultimately your money. I think that is the difference in terms of the system and the services. Now, that's I always like comparing this to, to mobile. If I want to make a mobile call, the network is bad, I might be slightly irritated, but I'm going to try again. But if I want to make banking and the bank's down, I'm immediately angry because I'm being withheld service from or access to not a service from my money. Why can't I get to my money? Why are you, stopping me from getting to my money? So it's super important to actually ensure that these things can be done, real time, and that we can. I mean, why can't we pay money real time into different places? Why can't we ensure that if I want to get something somewhere and it needs to be cleared immediately, why not? The technology certainly is there. We can, we're having a discussion now, 3 different parts of the world. Surely we should be able to safely and securely ensure that we can do that. And it is there.
Kind of points to the, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to add on, I think the information component is really critical. I go back to my 3 I's of the economy. If somebody pays their bill to somebody, they expect that to be updated as near real time as possible and get confirmation back. So it's both the businesses and the consumers who are really trying to adapt and use information. And it's critical that, when a consumer makes a payment, they really do want that confirmation, like, hey, my water bill was paid or my electric bill was paid, and get confirmation back. So it's a big transformation for lots of people in the ecosystem to meet the new demands of today's, what people want from their payments.
What's your favorite MO to, communicate with me, the customer? Is it text? Is it email? Is it in-app? Is it what's the best way to go forward there for real time, authentication?
It's all
of the above.
It goes to the customer's choice. What do they like, right? And what's their preferred method, right? Because once again, remember, we have a broad spectrum of customers, right? So to my dad, who's 86, to my kids, right? There's a very wide spectrum as to, how they want to interact. So we've got to support it all.
When Schalk was talking too, I was thinking, it's obviously big money. Big banks are investing huge money in this, and I just am starting to get the sense on the ROI here. It's sort of when he's talking about how quickly angry customers potentially get when that wall comes up between them and their money. You almost have no choice. I mean, the ROI is all or none, basically, to push the point.
Matt, I mean, counter to that, and apologies, Chris, just it's also not prohibiting certain things. Once you have that channel, if I know that this is Chris that I'm talking with, and I'd be curious to just understand, what we're seeing in terms of spam calls. It's incredible, robocalls and these kind of things. So, I'd be scared if a customer prefers to be, called, but in-app is certainly, from our perspective, the way to go, or leveraging FIDO and, a combination to that or something like that. So there's a lot of technologies, and I think the answer is exactly right. We should ensure that our customers have that choice. But certainly there's a lot of things that are channels that are overused, text being one of them. It's just spam. But specifically in terms of the ROI point, what we've seen is if you do this right, the channel becomes so powerful. It's not only that a customer can, switch on the basics that they want to do, that they want to be able to replicate certain things that they can get on other channels. One of our customers calculated that we've literally saving them millions of dollars per month, because what it allows now is customers don't need to go into the branch for certain things. I know this is you. I can get it to you on the mobile device. And this customer literally calculated the branch seconds that it took out of their their cycle in terms of what they could do. So I think this is super powerful in terms of ROI, in terms of enablement, but it's also for the customer. It's we should be able to do anything and everything on the mobile phone. What we've seen, the biggest transaction that a customer has told us, obviously we can't see, but is $90 million of a mobile phone. And I mean, that's incredible. And that's what we want to get to. That this is your device. It's a very personal device. It's my mobile, and it's a PC, and that's ultimately where we want to get to.
Yeah, I was reading this stat, and I'm not sure I fully understand this. Chris, I'm going to have you handle it because it's about banks. Says nearly 1/3 of consumers would use bank apps more if banks covered liability. What are we talking about here?
Well, I think this probably goes to, there's all kinds of, it depends on what jurisdiction you're in, but in the US, right, Reg E is, covering most transactions. And I think this goes back to, if the customer feels like they're in control and able to control the transactions, then they're gonna absolutely use the app. I don't think they're gonna get hung up on liability, because at the end of the day, customers do send money that they either didn't intend to send, or and banks do try to help customers recover things, but sometimes customers do actually make mistakes, and you can't.
No way.
Right. Right. And so there's not going to be blanket liability. I think that at the end of the day, if you've got a good process around authentication, good compliance with Reg E or the requisite regs in a jurisdiction, I don't really think that that's an impediment to usage. I think the impediment to usage is, did you design a great product that the customer sees value in and feels that it's safe, sound, and secure? That's what's going to drive. When was the last time when you were on something and you read through all the terms and conditions before you clicked I accept, right? So I don't think anybody's sitting there looking for the liability provisions. You've got to create the experience. And we're delivering and we're making sure that we're compliant with all laws and regs. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a barrier.
Talk to me about the experience and where we're headed. I'm seeing things like QR codes people want. They want peer-to-peer payments. I keep seeing stuff coming here about credit scores, instant access to credit scores. I mean, it's a floodgate, right?
Yes. Listen, that goes back to the immediacy of the economy. People want immediate access to information. They want to make immediate payments. And that all goes to the concept of real-time payments, or Zelle here in the US, and being able to push payments from one person to another, or from one person to a business. Whether you're getting a QR code to make that happen, all of those are all in play. You can see other parts of the world. China's a good example where QR code payments are predominantly one of the most largest ways in which payments occur. You'll continue to see different countries trying different modalities, but all of that comes back to what I think Schalk was talking about earlier, is if you've got the great app, if you've created it in an integrated process, the consumer's going to use it, or the small business is going to use it to do their banking. I think that's just the way everything's going. Immediate payments, quick, fast, and secure.
Absolutely. I guess the final thing is kind of wrap up with our crystal ball segment here, just kind of looking at the future of zero trust. We're going to have to stick with that term. I guess it's pretty embedded, so we're going to own it. And then, just what you see. Why don't we go, Chris, maybe you go first, and then we'll give Schalk the last word here today. Just kind of what you see for the future in the near term for both institutions, banks, et cetera, merchants, and consumers.
Yeah, so I think for all of the above, there's going to continue to be a push on the zero trust strategy in all form factors of payments. I think you're going to continue to see the adoption of both real-time information and real-time payments through various rails. And I think that you're going to continue to see, in essence, when you think about it, banking is 24/7, and people are going to want to be able to do it anytime, anywhere, safe, sound, and secure. And that's going to continue to be the push, no matter, and in many different currencies. And I use currencies loosely because it could be crypto, it could be.
He's a mind reader,
right? Exactly.
I was thinking that.
It could be crypto, it could be fiat currency, etc. All of that's going to continue to converge, and people are going to want to have digital wallets to be able to manage all that and be able to transact anywhere, anytime, anyhow.
Yeah. Schalk?
Chris, you've got a pretty clear crystal ball there, so that's I could say not a lot to add, but so in terms of this, I think it's going to be a convergence. From our perspective, we literally see it as experiences. This is something where we're bringing a lot of experiences into the way. I think as this is it's made great strides, and specifically likes of QR and these kind of things. I love QR. Because it literally is a point of sale that you can print. I mean, you can put it in a newspaper and there it is. So, my shop is closed, but you can buy the following things, and it's against the door. So, this is something that I think is going to become extremely, prevalent and I think it's got a lot of, additional things that it can enable in terms of peer-to-peer and wider, but also, in terms of security and wider, where we can actually ensure that this document is what it says it is, or I can click on something and beneficiaries are automatically populated in my banking app and things like that. So I think it's going to become, in terms of experiences, just easier. And I think our role as industry, in terms of a world where zero trust, which is obviously, it's a design, it's an architecture, which means, thou shalt not trust. We need to ensure we keep our customers safe, and we need to ensure that we continuously check, as per that design, who they are. And that means data points. That means integration of various technologies. As I said, from behavioral, to endpoints, to location, to the way you use certain things. Obviously, that's back to behavioral. So all of these things tie together, and that's just quivers in our arrow. Also, sorry, the other way around, arrows in the quiver. But ultimately, what this is to ensure that we're equipped as an industry to ensure that our customers have a super experience, because that's key. People ultimately use this. This is not something that we have to make a hurdle super high, and then it'll be great. If the hurdle is too high, this will fail. So what we need to do and ensure is that we make this as usable and as safe as possible, and then we'll have great experience, and then the future in terms of what you will be able to do is going to be incredible, I think.
Amen. It's all around, I think. Schalk Nolte, CEO of Entersekt. Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate you coming on. And PNC's Chris Ward, great guest out there, doing it from the road. Love it. So, guys, thank you. We'll talk to you again soon here in payments. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. Chris, just.
Thanks. Cheers.